How can you leverage a breakup to actually save your marriage? The average length of a separation for married couples who reunite is 2 years, which is a really long time if you're leaning in and they're leaning out, especially when statistics show that the longer that you're separated, the higher the odds are that you will be divorced. So being in a separation is terrifying because on the one hand, you know that it takes time and you really want to be patient, stay in your lane. But then on the other hand, you know that the longer that it takes, the worse your odds are. If you are in a separation and you want to rebuild their marriage, but they don't really want to talk about it with you, and you're trying to figure out how do you balance, respecting boundaries and giving them space with also fighting for the marriage and being a stand for a healthier marriage. That's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the biggest mistakes that are made during a separation that will work against your goal of reunification, 6 ways that you can very powerfully maximize your opportunity to get back together, and then most importantly, why separation can actually be the very thing that saves your marriage. If, your spouse is telling you that they need time, or maybe you've heard time heals all wounds and you think we just need time, I always want to just emphasize the fact that time is not what does it. There's something that you have to do with that time apart, right? Because if you're stuck in old ways of thinking, it's not going to change. People can be apart for years and then come back together and they just pick up right where they left off with the same exact dysfunction as if no time has passed at all. So it's really what you're going to be doing with that time to truly grow and integrate some insights that you've had in your time apart, because it is a really great opportunity to do that. That's what's going to make or break your opportunity to come back together. So first, I want to highlight the biggest challenges that get in the way, and then we'll get into what you can do about it. So the first challenge is fear and anxiety due to the unknown, right? Because our brains, we want certainty. We want to know what we can predict. That helps us feel safe. That's just the way that our brains are as human beings. And so, if we don't have that, if we have uncertainty, that whole limbo thing, especially if we are attached to the outcome, is very anxiety producing. It makes us feel very off balance. It makes us feel dysregulated, not grounded, and we're not usually leading with the smartest part of our brain, the frontal lobe of our brain, the more functioning, clear, lucid, higher self. We're more guided by the amygdala and those emotional fear-based responses or fight or flight. So the uncertainty of separation makes people react impulsively rather than strategically, and then they end up, shooting themselves in the foot. When you're in this place of uncertainty, it's human nature to want to seek certainty from an uncertain spouse. And so you may want immediate clarity. You may want to talk about things. You may want to ask them a lot of questions about the future. Where are you at? What do you think the odds are? Do you think you'd come to counseling with me? How long do you think you need? Are you in or out? Like just anything that you're trying to get clarity around from a spouse. If they had to force their hand, they would say no. A very understandable but very ineffective approach is to lead your conversations, your questions, or any kind of communication around seeking clarity, whether it's overt or whether it's more of a covert way to kind of feel the waters out. Also, it puts you in a state where you're waiting for a sign or some kind of external condition. So people will hesitate to take action on themselves and the changes that they can make because they're waiting for their spouse to show commitment before they do it, right? It's this whole idea of, well, it takes two. And so until they say that they're coming back to the marriage, until they come into counseling with me, until they tell me, yes, I'll give this a shot, there's not much I can do. I just have to wait for something external to happen, for them to make up their mind, for them to stop a divorce, for them to move back in, whatever it is that you're looking for. It's very tempting to think that that's what has to happen in order to move the needle. But it actually doesn't work that way, right? Because they can only make a decision about the future based on what information they already have, which is based on history. You create the future in the present. So until you have more time creating a new story, a new narrative, a new experience for them, if you try to force clarity, they're probably going to say no because they don't have enough information to say yes. The other thing that people fall into the trap of is trying to convince the other person to stay, just overtly, like really pitching it to them why it can be better. This often backfires, especially if you've separated before or if you've gotten to the brink before and then you've come back together and they're like, okay, let's try this again. And then something happened that made them feel like, okay, I gave it one last shot and now we're here and now we're separated. And then that sometimes for the leaning in spouse is the big wake up call of like, okay, something really different has to happen. Now I need to get them back to try it again because I see see that maybe I didn't work hard enough, or I didn't change my default modes, or there's just things that I could have done better. I want one more chance, right? So there's desperation, there's pleading, and there's push behaviors. And that creates resistance instead of rekindling connection. It usually backfires. Because here's the thing is, like, if you aren't the one that wants separation, but you're also being impacted by it, it's a very powerless feeling. So it makes sense that you want to push and try to get something from them from the outside so that you can have more power over this thing that's impacting you so directly. And that leads me to the second thing, which is that if you are feeling powerless in this situation because there is something impacting you that you didn't choose, that creates a disempowered mindset, a victim mindset. You're blaming them and you're angry at them for leaving, or angry at them for making that decision, and you're kind of putting it all back on them, trying to get them to make a different decision. If you lose sight of the power that you have to change their perception of you or what is possible, then you're just really stuck in a very disempowered place, and you're not going to be able to be proactive. You're not going to have what it takes internally and emotionally to stay the course for what you really want, because it is emotionally such a triggering situation. The third mistake that we see a lot is that you're talking about the relationship in a way, and this is very subtle and it can be unconscious and you don't even know you're doing it, but you're talking about the relationship in a way that evokes going back to something and speaking in terms of trying again. And the language that you're using makes them hear it as you want them to go back to something. And that's not what they want. They don't want to go back to something. And the only reason they're even at this point right now is because they don't think that it's possible to have something different. So we have to be really clear about what is the language that you're using to describe what it is that you're hoping for and what you think is possible. Make sure that you don't use the kind of language that sounds like backtracking or backsliding or returning to a previous era of your relationship that would make them run the other way. Because you're overlooking the fact that an entirely new foundation is necessary, and they're not even going to consider a future unless they can not only imagine a different foundation, imagine what's possible, but also believe that that can be not only created but sustained over time. That's the biggest thing I hear from leaning out spouses is, I believe they have good intentions, but I don't trust that the changes that they're making are going to stay, that they're not going to backslide into old ways. As soon as we get back into our comfort zone again, I'm afraid we'll backslide or go into complacency. The fourth thing is that emotional reactions will cause further damage. It's a mixed bag, right? You can be mad one minute and then you can be remorseful the next minute. It's a roller coaster. And so that puts you in a high risk of getting upset and having emotional outbursts or communicating in a way that is not mindful, that is not supportive of what you're trying to show them. And then that sort of reinforces their negative narrative of you. And then they use that as ammunition to say, see, this is why it's better that we're not together. This is why it's better that we're separated. And it's just a really painful cycle for people to be in. I have a lot of compassion for it, because you can intellectually know something isn't a good idea, but that those programs, those default programs, are so strong that they'll take over. And then the final mistake is overlooking or minimizing your own personal growth and the power that that actually has, because you're so focused on getting the certainty back, hoping to change their mind, focusing on how you're feeling or the logistics or what will it mean if we do get divorced and all of the what ifs, that you're not focusing on your own self-awareness or the insights that you could gain from this process. And you're not looking inward enough and focusing on your own personal growth. Without growth, those same issues are going to resurface even if reconciliation happens. And that's the sad thing, right? You can leave a relationship, you can not be in a relationship, you can go somewhere else, but you will take yourself with you, right? So you have to address your part in whatever came up in the dynamics. So what do you do about it, right? What are the solutions? How do you save your marriage while you're separated? Obviously, based on what I was just saying, is you have to focus on the self-improvement and the personal growth part of this. So rather than trying to fix the relationship immediately, you really want to work on becoming a stronger person. If that means right now just focusing on emotional regulation, if that means working on boundaries, internal boundaries or external boundaries, whatever it is, 2 areas that you can really focus on when it comes to personal growth is to look at what can I do to interrupt negative relationship patterns during this time of separation, because separation is actually a chance to reset toxic patterns. It's also a chance to acknowledge past mistakes and focus on healthier ways of being. If you're in the place where you're angry that they've walked away or that they've moved out or that they're about to, you might not agree with their take on things and you're still in a place of defending yourself or trying to show them that the relationship is worth saving. And in so doing, you don't acknowledge their feedback of you, or you minimize the role that you might have played in getting here. But the first step is you acknowledge that to them, so that that's the first step of them being even open to maybe it could change. change. You can't be open to a new reality if they don't even see the problem. You have to join them in at least a part of their narrative of why they got to this point in the first place. And that's what you can use this time to look at and to give them as an offering. It really lowers their defenses. It really helps them start to have a little bit of hope. Like, okay, I think they understand it. Now it's just a matter of, will they be able to execute something new? And the answer is always yes. We always can, as long as that's part of our goal. So you want to maintain self-awareness and avoid the victim mentality and really look at, what is my role in how we got here? There's got to be something that you can own, like there's 2%, even if it's a small percentage. And if you think there's nothing that you can own, if you think that they are wrong for leaving, they've got it all wrong, there's nothing that you did to create that, you have zero leverage. It's not about right or wrong, it's just about what works. The other thing that I think is so important if you are really trying to magnetize them back into the relationship is you have to have a very clear vision for the future. So instead of looking backwards and trying to relitigate old narratives, you create a new vision. You step out of the old stuff. You step out of the house that's crumbling. You go over here and you build a new one. In order to do that, you have to define what a healthy, fulfilling relationship looks like to you that would align with what they're saying they want. What are they saying they want, and where does that align with what you want? And then you build out your vision from there. And the reason why that's important is because it will guide the questions of, how do I show up? What direction do I want to lead our dynamics in? How do I show up in a way that supports that vision and also helps them to see me in a different light? How do I build new experiences? Because they have to have new experiences in order to have hope that it could be different coming back. And so the vision helps you stay grounded as you have good weeks and then bad weeks. Connecting to your vision, how am I showing up? Am I showing up in service of my vision? That's what's going to keep you sane. That's what's going to allow you to weather the storm of this process, because it's not easy to do this. Now, along those lines, the third thing you have to really think about is, and this is very much part of the vision, is how to become the spouse that you would want to have. How do you show up in a way that reflects the best version of yourself? What are some areas that in your life up to this point you've neglected? Maybe self-care, maybe it's self-development, maybe it's certain things you want to work on in your relationships in general, or just health and wellness. And so you don't feel your best, or maybe there's stuff going on at work, there's a career change that needs to happen. This is your opportunity to shine the light back onto yourself and say, what are the gaps in my development that I can focus on right now so that I can become the kind of spouse that I would want to have? How can you demonstrate kindness or patience or emotional maturity or emotional connection? Whatever it is, instead of telling them how it could be, this is the part where you start to show them in the capacity of friendship. Be the things that you want to show them that you can be once they return. Do it now. Don't wait for them to return to show them. You can show up in the new way as a friend, as somebody who is creating a positive experience for them, where they feel like, oh, this person's got my back, this person's being reasonable. Why wouldn't I want to be with this person, right? That's what you want to be thinking in terms of planting seeds to make them sort of second guess their decision. And this leads right into the next thing, which is maintaining smart contact. So smart contact is to avoid extremes. You don't want to go into total silence in acting out behaviors of like, fine, then I'm just going to completely wall off. And in this retaliatory way or in an overly self-protective way, I'm not saying this is easy, but this is the goal. And you also don't want to be in constant contact. You don't want to be in a pattern of communication that resembles the old relationship. You want to engage instead in a very neutral, sort of calm, business-like demeanor when you're talking about children, finances, logistics, but be warm, right? It's this balancing act of warmth, but also having boundaries around what you shouldn't really be talking about. I think you don't really need to be talking about the relationship, especially if you're at the beginning and your leaning out spouse has said, I just need time, I just need space, and they haven't been able to answer your questions yesterday or the week before. You just have to table those and resist the temptation to ask any questions about the relationship. Just show them what it feels like to have a healthy collaborative conversation. If they bring something up about the past from a place of that really hurt me or that impacted me negatively, in that case, you can respond to try to give them the repair that they're looking for, because that's going to serve your goals, right? That's a repair opportunity. So you don't want to throw that away and say, I'm not going to talk about that, unless you don't feel that you have the skills to do that. But if you feel like you can hold space and listen to them and they're like, you know what, that really hurt me that one time, that's a bid for connection. That's an opportunity to show them the new way that it could be going forward and to sort of give a taste of a promise of what it could be if they change their mind. But you don't want to initiate those repair conversations. You just want to be open to it. The fifth is you have to be patient, right? This takes time. You have to stay in the moment. if you're going to give space and time for clarity to develop naturally, the only way that you can really do that is to commit to being patient, because this isn't something that you wanted, right? You're the leaning in spouse. So it's going to go against your nature. So you have to really cultivate your intention around that and practice it. Allow them to process their emotions without any pressure. Their nervous system has to have a break from the dynamic long enough for them to be able to come back with a beginner's mind, with a fresh lens, and to see what's possible. So this means if you're going to really be patient, zero tolerance for any push behavior. So no pleading, no begging, no whining, no hovering, no trying to find things out about what they're up to. I know that that's hard, but if you can just put it on a note card, put it everywhere you go, put it on your mirror, wake up in the morning and look at it first thing, remind yourself so that it's top of mind, and develop that voice inside your mind so that that becomes stronger than the pull to do the things that are going to sabotage you. And then finally, the very last thing is, when you feel impatient, reframe all of this work as an opportunity, because it's hard, right? But if you treat it as a blessing and you use the separation as an opportunity to heal, it helps you stay strong. It helps you to stay steady and to ride the ups and downs without throwing in the towel, which is what it's going to take, right? Because they're leaning out. So you have to have enough faith for the both of you. You have to have enough strength and hold that frame of confidence about what's possible enough for the both of you until they start to absorb that as well. And having that kind of rock solid confidence to say, where can I heal? What triggers did I come to the relationship with that they just activated, but that's totally in me, that I have to heal anyway? Because even if this relationship doesn't work out, worst case scenario, I need to fix this for the next relationship, right? Healing allows for a fresh start regardless of the outcome. It allows you to be a better person and reach your life dreams no matter what form that takes. If it takes shape in the form of the person that you're focusing on now, or if somebody else will fill that. That's why the vision is so important, and laying the groundwork of how do I show up to become a match for what I really want in my relationship. So you really want to look at, what are the beliefs that you need to recondition, and how can I process my emotions without feeding any negative narratives? How can I just process it in my body? Like somatic experiencing, there's hypnotherapy, there's EFT, there's tapping, there's letting go by Dr. David Hawkins. He talks a lot about detaching from the thinking and moving into your body to process and metabolize emotions. Then you won't be guided by them, you won't be acting on them, and they move through you and crash like a wave on the beach, right? It builds and it crashes and now it's gone. And so now you're clear emotionally. And so when you have to interact with your leaning out spouse, you're not coming with all of this stuff that they can feel. And that actually, in my experience, only when you get to that point do they start to lean in and get curious and be like, this space between us feels safer. I can lean into it a little bit and find out what's going on your side, because I can feel how grounded you are. And I can feel that you're no longer pulling on me. So there's a lot of hope here. It's very difficult to be in a situation where you're in a separation and you don't want to be in a separation, but you can always show up to support what's possible. You can always show up to embody that without pitching, without explaining, even when you don't have certainty. It's possible. I see this all the time. I've seen people who they are sure they're never coming back. They're positive they are not coming back, and they come back. They just think they can't do it. They think they can't get past the resentment. They don't think that their leaning out in spouse really can evolve and change. They just don't think it's possible with that person. And the only way they're going to change their mind is once they see it with their own eyes. So cultivate a sense of well-being no matter the outcome, and connect to your vision, and you can do it. It is difficult, but everyone who does this work is better off for it. Nobody regrets doing the inner work in a separation, even if their spouse doesn't come back. But you also might magnetize them back into the relationship, and they might end up thanking you for the way that you fought for the relationship. And it is such a nuanced, beautiful thing to be able to walk that tightrope of taking a stand for the relationship in the long term, while also accepting that your spouse doesn't want that in the short term. That's it. I just want to leave you with some hope that it's possible, and that you don't have to abandon your own life dreams and your own goals. You just have to find the way to do it in a way that honors where they're at as well, so that you're not creating more resistance. And if you like my content or the topics that I cover, please subscribe to my channel. That way it's going to reach more people who need to hear this stuff, and you won't miss any of my weekly videos.